Good evening, everybody. Dr. Thompson here with the Zenfly Health Center, your Wellness Way affiliate right here in Yorkville, Illinois. Coming on a little bit later, just finished up with patients, and then I realized to do this live, I needed to charge my phone or else I'd run out of battery. So I hope you guys are having a great Monday evening. Welcome to tonight's question and answer. If you submitted a question, thank you so much for doing that. We have a lot of awesome questions, and actually I have time to go over every single one that all of you asked. I know I did a live video on Saturday and said, hey, submit your question, and a good chance that I am going to be answering it. So today we're going to be talking about a lot of different things. We're going to talk about gas and flatulence. We're going to talk about the brain and memory. We're going to talk about, let's see, I know I have it, all of them in here, about inflammation and even colon cancer, about the thyroid, about the adrenals, Addison's disease. A lot of great questions. So again, guys, thank you so much for submitting those questions. I'm going to do my best in order to answer them. Hopefully they make a lot of sense. I got a lot of questions, so hopefully I can kind of rapid fire through them and not take a ton of time. But if you submitted a question, I am going to answer it tonight, all right? So if you guys are watching right now, make sure that you guys like our page, and then also make sure that you follow and subscribe to our page. Anytime that we go live a couple of times a week, you will then be notified so that you can catch our live videos. And again, we have awesome people that watch from all over the United States. I think it's awesome. I think it's fantastic. And we want to give you guys valuable content on your health journey and really just help to see things from a different perspective. And guys, all of the different things that I'm going to be going over, please share this too, because I guarantee you there's someone on your friends list that has a similar issue that will help them to look at it from a different perspective, and they're going to be eternally grateful to you for loving them enough to share this information. So let's get into the Q&A with the one and only Dr. Nathan Thompson. We are actually all are a one and only. We are all special. We all are unique, all right? So thanks again for the questions. Let's get into it, all right? So Annie asked a question. She says, hey, Doc, I was wondering if flatulence in and of itself is a bad thing or when accompanied by pain, diarrhea, cramping, et cetera, et cetera. I was told that this is just a natural part of digestion. So thank you very much, Annie. Listen, I always say if someone asks the question, there's probably 150 people that have actually thought about this question. So here's the thing with flatulence and things like that. The biggest thing that I can tell you is that when someone does have a lot of gastrointestinal inflammation, yes, they are going to have actually more gas and they are going to have more flatulence. I would actually say in proper context, it's always the best to actually be able to test, okay? So what do you test? You test food allergies, IgG, sometimes even IgE as well, and then also testing stool. And the reason why is this, because stool will tell you if you have some things that are growing in the gastrointestinal system, in the GI system, that can produce a lot of gas. If you got some critters that are in there that are using some of that food and are using that in order to make metabolic byproducts like gas or flatulence, then yes, you will experience a lot more flatulence. So is gas in and of itself normal? Well, I would say this. I would say you should actually have very little gas, okay? But the problem is that in the United States, all of our digestive systems are an absolute wreck. You look at the average person's digestive system and their barriers have been destroyed. They probably produce not enough stomach acid, probably have some level of inflammation in the gastrointestinal system. And so remember, there's just a difference between common and normal. So just because a lot of people might have gas doesn't necessarily mean it's normal. But I would say is make sure that you're getting your foods tested and also possibly testing stool. And I'll give you a perfect example. You know, all of our testing that has come in over the last, week and a half and 2 weeks, I tell you what, every single person has a food allergy to brewer's yeast and baker's yeast. And really high. And anytime we see that on a food allergy test, I know, hey, this person is eating a lot of grains and a lot of sugar. And you start to see that they are reacting to a lot of sugars and like a lot of fruit and things like that. I know that they're not probably breaking down their sugars very well, number one. But number two, if you are seeing that there's a lot of yeast, whether it's brewer's yeast or actually whether it's baker's yeast, a lot of times I can safely assume that this person probably has a yeast overgrowth in their gastrointestinal system. And remember, that yeast, anytime you have low stomach acid, poor digestion, things like that, yeast will start to overgrow. And man, that yeast absolutely loves simple sugars. And yes, they will actually produce a lot of gas as they start to metabolize those sugars within the gastrointestinal system. And so one of the ways that you can actually know if you possibly do have a yeast overgrowth, even without testing it, is eat fruit like exclusively for 3 or 4 days, and I guarantee if you start to really bloat and your stomach starts to come out and you get very gassy, chances are you probably have a yeast overgrowth in the gastrointestinal system. So long answer short, testing it is always key. Now, the other thing is that this is what's really interesting, is that different bacteria will produce different metabolic byproducts, and so you can almost see what's going on by actually how the flatulence actually smells. So there's a difference in how things will actually smell. So something that smells very like a rotten egg, usually there's an overgrowth of specific bacteria in there. So you can almost tell by the flatulence of what could be actually overgrowing. And remember, they actually said we can actually determine now whether someone has colon cancer by the smell of the flatulence. In fact, I think dogs were able to notice a difference in the actual the smell of your gas and see if there was something that was very serious that was actually going on. But again, always test, food test, and then possibly a stool test as well. Okay. All right, Deanne asked a great question as far as fecal secretory IgA results, which, by the way, comes from a stool test. I have a level of over 6,000, okay? Very high, by the way. My Wellness Way doc informed me that this can sometimes be a precursor to colon cancer. I'm on the supplements, avoiding food allergies, but wondering if something else may play a role in these numbers, okay? So the thing is with colon cancer and things like this, I just want you to think about this, is that cancer grows in an inflammatory environment. And you have to look at cancer from a totally different perspective. What if cancer wasn't your worst enemy, okay? I know that's very tough for people to wrap their minds around, but what if it was just what we would call adaptive physiology? What I mean by that is, guys, I want to show you something. If you look at my hands right in through here, right? If you look at my hands are actually very gnarly and they're very calloused, okay? The reason why they're kind of gnarly and they're kind of callous is because for 10 years, I have been constantly, when I work out, picking up a barbell or hanging from a pull-up bar, and I have just been beating up my hands constantly. And so one of the things that happens to your hands if you're always beating them up is your hands have to adapt to the work that you are putting in. So what do the hands become? Well, the hands start to develop calluses. They start just to become very tough. And the thing is that your hands adapt to this, because otherwise what would happen is you keep rubbing your hands raw. And if you were always rubbing them raw, you would get blisters, you would get infections. In fact, probably an infection would get so bad, you probably would lose your hand at some point. So what happens is this tissue has to adapt to its environment. Same thing is going to happen when it comes to colon cancer. Guys, this is absolutely fascinating. And just think of this. If you aren't breaking down your foods very well, you're very low stomach acid, not breaking down the food the way that you're supposed to, not producing enough bile acids, and you're eating a bunch of inflammatory food, the immune system is always being activated, around the barrier of the gastrointestinal system, is that tissue has to adapt, okay? So remember, tissue has the choice. Well, we can try to adapt, or we can just actually die. And so really what happens is when you're looking at things like colon cancer, think of it as tissue adaptation, okay? So the body has a choice. Well, if we don't adapt in some way, then the colon is just going to die, or it's going to perforate, and then I'll become develop sepsis because all of this bacteria is just going to get spilled in my abdominal cavity. So it has to actually adapt under this high inflammatory environment. It has to actually toughen up. And so, one of the precursors of colon cancer is having a high inflammatory environment. and the tissue is just adapting. So here it is. It just starts to toughen up. It starts to develop polyps, and that polyps actually turns cancerous. And the body makes a choice. Hey, listen, this can turn into cancer. Eventually it's going to kill me, but I'd rather die down the road than actually die right now. So hopefully, guys, that makes sense. So it can secretory IgA. Can this lead to colon cancer? The answer is yes. All right. So yes, it actually can. The other thing too is that when it comes to your stool tests and stuff, there's another test that you can look for that we measure on stool. It's called beta-glucuronidase. And typically when that has been elevated, that can be a good marker for the potential for cancer. So guys, we're just looking at things rather than looking at them from a macro view, which is just basically, what a lower GI when they're just putting a camera in there and looking for polyps. You're looking at the macro view, whereas when you look at a stool test, you are looking at it from a biochemical level. So I mean, think of like visual, the naked eye to a microscope and then going down into the biochemical level. That's really what we're doing when it looks at the stool. So Deanna, it actually looks like they have you started in the right direction. And the biggest thing that you have to do is you have to give it time, especially. This does not go down overnight, nor did it actually build up overnight. So make sure you just keep following, what your Wellness Way doctor is actually saying, okay? And this is actually what I found. I pulled this off for you, Deanne, from PubMed. And this comes from PubMed, National Institute of Health. They said patients with colorectal cancer are characterized by increased concentration of fecal HB complex, which is basically an immune complex, and myeloperoxidase and secretory IgA, okay? So basically what you are seeing is you're seeing some immune complexes in there, you're looking at some enzymes, and then you're also looking at what's known as an increase in secretory IgA. And what is that? And this is basically an immunoglobulin that your body makes, and just think of them, they're like the bouncers at the front of the bar, meaning when there's a lot of inflammation, it's trying to protect things from coming in. It's trying to protect that barrier. And so they're sitting here, the more there are, the more they're saying, hey, we need more bouncers here in order to protect this gastrointestinal system. So even PubMed agrees with it, okay? Lisa, hopefully you're doing well. I see right now that you're watching, and at the same time, we're actually going to answer your question. So Lisa asks, hello, Dr. Nathan, when removing one's amalgams, can that process alone trigger a negative reaction to the thyroid if someone is already dealing with Hashimoto's? Okay, so here's the thing. We actually talked about this on Saturday at our thyroid event. Obviously, if you didn't have a chance to be able to make it because you're not from the area, if you go to the top of our page, I talk about this among a lot of other things too. On our thyroid talk, but I'll be talking about it in our thyroid webinar on Thursday at 8 o'clock p.m. And it's a webinar, and all you have to do is go to the top of the page and register on Eventbrite. It is a paid event, and mainly because just to pay for all of our software. This stuff is really expensive to run webinars. But we're going to be talking about that, and then once you register on Eventbrite, you'll get an email that will actually take you to the actual webinar to register for, and then it'll give you some email reminders to make sure that you're joining at 8 o'clock on Thursday night. So make sure, Lisa, you go and join that. However, I am going to answer this specific question because it's really just one thing out of a lot of other things that we answer, okay? So here's the thing when it comes to amalgams, all right? I 100% recommend that you get your amalgams out, okay? 100%. However, with a lot of people, if they got a lot of other bigger issues that are going on, I always say this is a good thing to start to approach down the road, okay? And the reason why is getting amalgams out can be pretty expensive, but once you get it stabilized and you handle some of the biggest things, then you can also go back and then say, okay, let's start working on some of these other things as well. But if you are going to get your amalgams out, I've had all of my amalgams out. I've had my root canals pulled out, all of those different things about 7-8 years ago. The thing is if you're going to get your amalgams out, you 100% must work with a holistic dentist or work with a biological dentist. They're the same. And so the holistic dentist, the biological dentist, they will use the correct, safe procedures to remove mercury out of the mouth, okay? The key is that if you do have silver amalgams in your mouth, The older they are, the more that they're going to off-gas anytime that you chew, drink a hot beverage, or anything like that. However, what will make it even worse is that if you take just a general dentist and they go in and they drill this and release a lot of mercury vapor, mercury dust that you are breathing in, because you will have an absolute acute exposure. Any dentist is going to say, yeah, we take it out, no big deal, no problem, but they're not using the correct safety protocols, especially like a slow speed drill. It's always being cooled down with water, dental dam, oxygen, activated charcoal. Those are things that I did, with that. So sometimes I say, if you don't have access to a biological dentist, don't worry about it. Just keep them in for now, because getting them out without proper safety will absolutely wreck you, especially. But with Hashimoto's, remember, mercury actually, in fact, this actually comes from the talk that we did. Actually comes from an environmental health perspective. Thyroid hormones in relation to lead, mercury, cadmium, exposure to the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey. So this was literally 13, 14 years ago. Here's what they said. There were negative associations between mercury and thyroid levels that are consistent with proposed mechanisms for mercury toxicity, in which mercury accumulates in the thyroid and reduces iodide uptake. Okay? So yes, heavy metals, it's not just mercury, it's lead, it's cadmium. Guys, if you knew where some of these exposures were, it absolutely would just make your mouth drop. But just remember this, mercury isn't going to trigger Hashimoto's, an autoimmune reaction, as much as it's going to, at the level of the tissue, block the uptake of iodide, okay? So really, when you look at it, it's really going to cause a decrease in T4 output more than anything else. So you'll get the signal from your brain, from the pituitary to the thyroid, but that mercury is going to be blocking the actual just uptake of iodine to be able to make T1 to T2 to T3 to T4, spit it out of the thyroid, then can get it converted at the level of the gastrointestinal system, the liver, and then some of the muscle tissue as well, okay? But that's something that I would definitely do. If you haven't, do it down the road. Make sure you take care of some of the biggest ones especially, all right? All right, Sue asked a great question. Hi, Dr. Nate. I love how everyone says, hi, Dr. Nate. Hello. I heard that magnesium threonate is good for memory. My mom had dementia, and I thought maybe I should start taking it to protect my brain from getting it, all right? Guys, if you guys have seen dementia, oh my goodness, the amount of dementia that you are seeing. And I would say this. I actually looked this up because most people, guys, are woefully magnesium deficient. In fact, some of the things I actually are recommending first for a lot of people is just start getting your minerals up. So get your magnesium up. We give them Relax. And sometimes we have them taking 2 to 3 teaspoons of that a day. Start pumping in the potassium. Start getting them to take a teaspoon of unrefined sea salt or Himalayan pink salt just to get mineral function back up. Because guys, you're low in minerals, a lot of body processes are going to suffer. And the same is true when it comes to magnesium, because magnesium is not just for memory. Magnesium is not just for muscle function. Magnesium has literally hundreds of functions inside the body. And it isn't that magnesium makes you healthier, it's just you need magnesium in order to carry out biochemical processes in your body, including aerobic respiration. So the ability to be able to take oxygen and be able to use it as an energy source. So you need magnesium. So my goodness, you technically could actually just feel tired if you didn't have enough magnesium. But can magnesium actually help to improve memory? Well, according to this, they actually say yes, because this comes from the Journal of Neuron. And this was actually 11 years ago. And so they actually found that giving magnesium helped rats actually with their learning abilities, working memory, short and long-term memory, okay? And so they found that it actually helped them improve memory. And it actually makes sense because remember, your brain needs magnesium in the mitochondria to be able to produce energy. When those things produce energy in neurons, they are producing thought, and they're producing memory, and they're producing motor function. They're producing a lot of different things. But I will tell you this, okay? I will tell you this, is that I think even more than magnesium, I'm not opposed to it at all from taking magnesium, but when it comes to protecting your brain, there are some other things that are just as important, if not way more important when it comes to protecting your brain. There's a lot of different reasons why. So number one, you've seen the problem with dementia get infinitely worse when people are on PPIs, proton pump inhibitors, antacids, reflux medication. And the reason why is because it will actually inhibit the production of acetylcholine, which is needed for memory, okay? So being on acid reflux medications. Number two, we've seen it increase because we've seen so many people go on statin drugs, cholesterol-lowering drugs. Remember this: your brain is mostly cholesterol. When you start artificially lowering systemic cholesterol levels, remember, you're not just lowering cholesterol in your arteries; you're lowering cholesterol in your whole entire body, which can then lead to problems with dementia and memory loss, including depression. Okay. The third thing is check your blood sugars, because yes, your body can become insulin resistant. Your muscle cells, your organ cells can become insulin resistant, but so can your brain. And in fact, they're calling now dementia type 3 diabetes, which means that your brain is severely insulin resistant. So I want you to think about it. If your brain is insulin resistant, remember the brain runs on sugar. And then on top of that, so it cannot respond to insulin, can't get sugar into those cells, into those neurons, which means you're going to have to go and run on actually fat metabolism. But guys, if people have problems with insulin resistance, their liver is so messed up and is so fatty that they're having a hard time actually converting fatty acids into an energy source to be able to use. So literally what's happening is these people are really running on no energy. And so, in fact, this is what I see when people are type 2 diabetics, is they call it diabetes brain. So you look at a long-term type 2 diabetic, look at their brains. They have poor memory, poor recall, they are everything, and they have dementia, okay? And we are going to see dementia absolutely skyrocket, because there are people now in their 50s and 60s. These are the ones into their 70s that are going to be having dementia. And guys, a third of people in the United States have some level of blood sugar and insulin dysfunction that's going on, if you can believe it. So our next literally storm is going to be one of just people losing their brains and having dementia. And then the last thing is heavy metals, guys. So metals. So things like aluminum, like in your deodorant, your aluminum cans, aluminum in vaccines. It's there. And other metals that can interfere with it, like mercury and cadmium and lead. And so we're getting exposed to these things all the time. And it's usually not just one thing, but it's all of these different things that are adding up that literally just starts to damage the brain, cause shrinkage of the brain, and just makes these neurons not connect to one another anymore. So great question about magnesium, but it goes obviously a lot deeper, okay? Ashley asked, what is your opinion on Zeolite products, TRS, which I think TRS is actually a specific brand of a Zeolite product. Dr. Nate, what on earth is Zeolite? All right. So Zeolite is actually, it's like volcanic ash, and Zeolite has an affinity to bind toxins. Okay. So my answer is I love them. Okay. We actually use Zeolite, but we don't use it in everyone. So Zeolite has the ability, the affinity to be able to bind to toxins. And so yes, like metals, be able to pull out toxins. So kind of like a lesser provoking agent than they used to have back in the day, DMSA, DMSO, and the FDA said, we don't want people to have access to that stuff, so you need it only with a prescription only. So if you didn't have, access to be able to prescribe drugs, you couldn't do it. And guys, most medical doctors aren't prescribing any DMSA, DMSO, or what is known as a provoking agent that has the ability to be able to kind of provoke metals out of tissue to be excreted out. So something that's a little bit less is going to be things like zeolite, okay? Now just remember this, is the last thing that we really want to work on is metals and things like that, because there's just so many foundational things to be able to work on. But someone's got an issue with like mold, for example, is that we will use that, especially people who can't have an immune reaction to mold, and the mold toxicity just persists all the time and produce all these immune system reactions taking place, is that, we give them some zeolite in order to start to provoke that out. But really it's just looking at provoking and binding the toxin. But remember, you still have to be able to get rid of it through the liver. So you have these phase 1, phase 2 of detoxification. So you need to do that. You need to have a healthy phase 2 level of detoxification. You need the ability to be able to like produce, a good amount of bile. And then you also have to be able to eliminate it through the gastrointestinal system. So you want to make sure that the GI system isn't inflamed. You want to make sure that beta-glucuronidase isn't elevated, because that will actually cause retoxification back into your system. So it's like detox, retox, detox, retox. So a lot of times, you got a bad gastrointestinal system where you say, let's not provoke it and pull it out quite yet, because you're going to pull it out and provoke it, and then you're just going to put it back and give a person a more acute exposure back in your body. So hopefully that makes a lot of sense. So yes, I do recommend it, but it's not something that we're recommending a ton. But it's a great idea behind it. And just remember this too: if you're trying to pull out metals, you're trying to pull out mold and things like that, a lot of times what you need to take with this particular with zeolite is maybe some binders like activated charcoal, bentonite clay, and things like that, just to make sure that as it's getting excreted, it's bound up in the intestines so that it doesn't just like get recirculated throughout the body. So great question. Is there, Lisa asks, is there any way to open up arteries that are 100% blocked? Ooh, that's a great question, guys. All right. And I'm guessing probably what you're talking about is people who have cardiovascular disease. And guys, arteries can be blocked anywhere, really. I mean, heck, you can look inside the eye. And I mean, this is actually a good test that eye doctors do. When they dilate your pupils and they look inside the eye with that lens, basically what they're looking at is they're looking to see if there is any atherosclerosis within the small arteries within the eye. And the reason why is because if it's happening there, it's happening systemically. Now, it just so happens that when you're going to have most of the symptoms are going to affect the function of an organ that, if it doesn't function, will kill you quickly, which means the heart and then also the brain. So you're looking at stroke and you're looking at heart attack. So they can even see it take place by doing an eye exam. So what happens though if you have an artery, let's say it's going to the heart, and it's 100% blocked? The first question that I would ask is why? Why is it 100% blocked? So some of the tests that I would want to look at, is it actually not just cholesterol at all, it is what is the cholesterol type? So what type of cholesterol are they making? So cholesterol particle size makes a big difference. So is it the small, heavy golf balls? Or are they the light, fluffy tennis balls? If they're the small, really dense golf balls, you better start changing some of that physiology, because that's the one that really irritates the lining of the arteries that can cause the plaquing. So the other thing you want to look at is what are their C-reactive protein levels? What are their homocysteine levels? So they have high homocysteine, high C-reactive protein. Do they have an infection that's going on somewhere? Do they have a liver that is not properly methylating and getting rid of things? Because if someone cannot properly methylate, they'll tend to kick out a lot of homocysteine. They'll also tend to have a lot of chronic pain, a lot of depression, a lot of fibromyalgia symptoms as well. So what happens if there's 100%? I'm going to give you a perfect example, because how many times has someone gone in, they're having a little bit of chest pain, and they go in and they do like an echocardiogram, and they say, oh my gosh, the arteries that are going into your heart are 99% blocked. And so the doctor says, you better have an open heart procedure and do a bypass right away, or you may not make it until tomorrow morning. And I look at this and I shake my head, because I want you really to think about it. There is no way on God's green earth that your heart would be able to function if it truly was 100% blocked, okay? It's impossible. So I want you guys to understand something, is that if there has been a lot of inflammation, there's been a lot of immune responses that's now causing that atherosclerotic plaquing, the first question I would ask is it stable? If it's stable, leave it there. But the other thing too is that as that artery starts to get plaquing and you're getting less and less blood to go there to feed whatever it needs to be fed downstream, the body does a miraculous thing. When it starts to notice a decrease in oxygenation of the tissue, here's what's amazing, is that it will actually these endothelial growth factors will then start to create a natural bypass around where the artery is blocked. This is what's fascinating. So it will produce these small little capillaries around the bypass for blood to be able to go around. And it's called collateralization. And it's absolutely fascinating. And this is why people are walking around with a 99% occluded artery, because they have created collateral arteries around it as a natural bypass. Oh my goodness. A natural bypass. Think about it. But they say you need to go and do a bypass in which we're going to take a vein out of your leg and we're going to put a bypass, there. Here's what's interesting, guys. There has never been a double-blind, placebo-controlled study on whether an open heart surgery bypass is even effective, if it even caused a longer life. They've never studied it. Yet that's just the natural standard practice of medicines, but they've never done any study whether it's actually efficacious or not. Yet, this is a test, or this is a surgery that is $150,000, and you come with a giant thing, like they saw open your chest, rip it open, take the heart out, and do the bypass right there, and they put you on literally they're oxygenating your blood through a machine during this whole procedure. So that's what I always ask is that surgery actually needed? Even sometimes they'll put in a stent. And guys, I've actually read studies that they've said that you put a stent in, actually if you just would start exercising, it would actually outperform the stent. So how many times have you seen people, they put a stent in and the stent collapses and the stent fails? So what would you actually do if someone had? I would look at those 3 tests, see what we needed to do in order to control and start to eliminate those inflammatory processes that are going on, because it literally could be anything. It could be coming from the GI, it could be coming from literally all these different things, liver, whatever it might be, is find the cause. Now, are there some things that you can do in order to help with cholesterol metabolism, to help with nitric oxide production, to try to open up those arteries a little bit more? Absolutely. I would actually, say a lot of B vitamins, especially things like niacin, actually methyl B12 are great things. In fact, guys, you're more likely to die of a heart attack from being B vitamin deficient than you are of having high cholesterol. So looking at the B vitamins, but looking at things like beets, because beets will help with nitric oxide production to help open up those arteries. Resveratrol, Japanese knotweed, things like that can be very effective when it comes to doing those things. But the main thing is lower that inflammation 100%. I'll give you a perfect example. Here is a person who is literally 52 years of age, about 4 or 5 years, like late 40s. They said he had a huge blockage, went in for open heart surgery, stents, the stents have failed, and I think it was like a quadruple bypass surgery. Now, when you look at this is after the surgery. And by the way, he did not have high cholesterol at all. Let me say that again. He did not have high cholesterol, because remember, cholesterol does not cause heart disease. It doesn't cause heart disease. There's other things that are going on. So here he was taking antidepressants. He was taking medications for reflux. He was taking for gout. So you see he's got some metabolism issues that are going on. Depression, high blood pressure, cholesterol, on blood thinners, another blood pressure medication, another cholesterol issue, and then also was on Viagra. Imagine that. So his cholesterol, when we measured it, was at 103. You talk about like having cholesterol so low that not able to produce your steroid hormones. So can he produce enough cortisol? I don't know. Can he, in fact, he was very low cortisol as well. Can he produce testosterone? Absolutely tanked. Why do you think he's taking Viagra? Can he actually produce things like serotonin? Nope. Because actually cholesterol medication is actually, it's well known, lower your cholesterol that much and you will have problems with memory, fatigue. You'll also have problems with depression. So a lot of things that you are saying, he's taking medications that clinically were even indicated. It was just the protocol that a person is supposed to go after they've had an open heart procedure. Even if they don't need it or not, the doctors are still giving them that. So when you look at that, like 10 different medications. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 medications with no end in sight, okay? Kim asks, I'd love to learn more about why the brat diet is not the best choice when dealing with the stomach flu. What are some better options? Well, I would say this. The brat diet is basically bananas, rice, apples, and then tea. What is the tea? I could look it up, but tea. It's something. So anyway, basically what they're saying is give it some starchy, give some starchy carbs, and this is if someone has a stomach flu. So here's the first thing is this, because people the problem is that we think that throwing up, diarrhea, vomiting, fever, things like that, we think that they're absolutely terrible. Toast. Yes, that's right, toast. We think that they're terrible, and it's something that we actually need to control. Okay, so when someone says, "Gosh, man, I started on the herbs, I started doing this, and I had diarrhea for 3 days," you know what I say? Great. Or I ate something bad and I threw it up. Great, because I want you to think about it. You get something in the gastrointestinal system, so you might not be. And this is true like when someone has food poisoning, for example. They have food poisoning. Remember, the stomach is responsible for sterilizing your food. If you're low stomach acid, it's very easy to get an E. coli infection. By the way, if you get an E. coli infection, it's going to play a number on your gastrointestinal system if you don't do something about it. But think of this. If I ingest something and it's a poison, I better throw up or else it will kill me. If it makes its way further down the gastrointestinal system, I better have diarrhea in order to get rid of it. In fact, you eat something that can be a food allergy, for example, and you start to have a proper immune system response to it. What your body does is the GI system is just going to suck in some water into the GI system in order to flush it out as quickly as possible. So I throw it up, I have diarrhea, might have a fever in order to increase the immune response. So it's not necessarily bad. So if you actually if you are having that reaction or you have what is called the stomach flu, here's what I recommend. Don't eat. You have enough left in reserve. And if you're throwing up and you have a lot of diarrhea, just make sure you get some electrolytes in. So have a little bit of salt water, have some potassium, have some magnesium. Just keep your electrolytes up more than anything else. And then let the body heal. Because remember, you're having an inflammatory response. And that's what we don't understand, is that I hurt something, I ingest a food allergy, I inflame my gut. You are probably going to have 7 to 10 days for that immune system to be able to handle it properly. So biggest thing is just be patient, especially. So I would say just make sure you get your electrolytes up, okay? Nancy, how are you doing? I think, Nancy, I'm going to be talking to you for a phone consult very soon. So Dr. Nate, I had a question about the Wellness Way liquid herbs, all right? And give me a thumbs up if you are taking the Wellness Way liquid herbs, if you have had them, okay? If you have had them, give me a thumbs up, because boy, they taste awful, but they're also very good. And people ask me, why do we have liquid herbs? And I do understand that not a lot of people actually like them, but one of the reasons why liquid is because most people are coming in with gastrointestinal systems that are just not in the best shape. And so this is the easiest way to get them in, the quickest and the easiest without needing a lot of digestive health. All right. So question about the Wellness Way liquid herbs. Is it okay to pre-mix them in a cocktail hours ahead of time? Wondering about my husband taking them to work in the future. Yes, I would say yes. All right. The only thing that I would, try to do is, just try to make sure that they're covered. Just don't leave them open in the air. Although the alcohol does help to prevent, bacterial growth and things like that. But actually, when I take mine in the morning and I take them in the afternoon, I pre-mix them into a shot glass, and I probably have about this much into a shot glass, and I just down it all at once. So I don't take them separately, because listen, if you take them separately, they're all getting mixed together and they're all getting absorbed the same anyway. So absolutely, I think that you could pre-mix them. I think that would be great. It's a great idea. All right, Amy Irvin. How you doing, Amy? She said, I have read that the charred part of food on the grill is cancerous. Is this true? Well, I'm going to say this is if you actually look, they're saying, well, we don't know. However, I just want you to remember this, is anytime that you overcook any type of food, you are going to change the structure of the food. And I want you to think about it, is that anytime like you burn something, it changes its molecular makeup into something that is like charred and carbon and things like that. So we're not going to necessarily eat charred carbon. So at that point, there really becomes no nutritional value. But when you talk about charred meat, there are certain compounds that can be present in actually the charring. Same thing when it comes to things like French fries that are cooked in oil and they become burnt. And I would say, just as a general rule, is don't overcook your food. Now, sometimes people do have to cook like their vegetables a lot because they don't have very good enzyme function in their pancreas. And so sometimes cooking it a little bit more, even though there's going to be a little bit less nutritional value, will help them to be able to break down the food just a little bit easier. But when it comes to meat, for example, is I would say, even though I usually, if I eat meat, it's medium well, I definitely wouldn't do it well. And probably ideally it should be like rare to medium rare. So I know a lot of people, don't necessarily like medium rare food. But the other thing is too, is, if you're going to be having like red meat, for example, remember to be eating organ meat. And also remember, if you're going to have any kind of like red meat in the form of cow or something like that, you're always going to be better if it's going to be grass-fed, 100% grass-fed, grass-finished. It's going to have a lot higher omega-3 fatty acid content in it than something that's grain-fed and something that you just buy at the grocery store. So yes, I definitely would not overcook your food. And if you in fact burn it, either just slice off the part that is burned or just throw it away in general. All right. And if someone keeps burning the food, you need to talk to the chef. So if it's your husband, you might need to have a sit down with him. All right, guys, we got one more. This is actually a really good question. Erica asked the question, can you talk about Addison's disease? All right, so last question. I'm going to talk about Addison's disease. And basically, guys, what Addison's disease is that it's adrenal insufficiency, okay? Adrenal insufficiency. What do you mean by adrenal insufficiency? Well, you got these two little adrenal glands. I mean, they're only about this big. They sit on top of the kidneys, and they're responsible for the production of a lot of hormones. In fact, the adrenal glands are responsible for a woman, all of their estradiol, testosterone, things like that after menopause. And progesterone and things like that. If you are not of menopause, you're getting a lot of your progesterone and your estradiol that are going to be made actually by the ovaries and by the egg. So the adrenal glands are doing a lot of things. There's a lot of functions that the adrenal glands are doing. But how they're talking about Addison's and adrenal insufficiency, because remember, it's producing things like DHEA, testosterone, progesterone. They're contributing also cortisol. The inner part of it is actually adrenaline. But the main thing that they're talking about is cortisol. So what is cortisol? Cortisol is a stress hormone. And cortisol is produced during times of psychological stress or when your blood sugar goes low, okay? So when the blood sugar goes low, the body will release cortisol. That will then send a signal and signals the liver to release glucagon, and then it will then start to cleave off stored sugar like glycogen in order to get your blood sugar back up again, okay? So if people have Addison's disease, then they have a hard time, or adrenal insufficiency, they have a hard time being able to produce sufficient cortisol, which means if you cannot produce sufficient cortisol, you have a hard time raising your blood sugar, which means you're going to be like this all the time. Typically, you're going to have very low energy. Good luck trying to work out, because you're going to work out and you are not going to have the energy to be able to do it. So they're trying to work out and they slosh through the workout and then need to take a nap for 2 or 3 hours afterwards. So they're going to run into blood sugar issues, not be able to exercise, fatigue all of the time. And this is also, this says this, if anyone's taking Synthroid, is that you should never ever take Synthroid if you have any kind of adrenal insufficiency, like Addison's, for example. Now, I know that they throw around this term all the time about I have adrenal fatigue. I have adrenal fatigue. The thing is that the adrenals aren't fatigued as much as they are down regulated. And you got to figure out why the adrenals are saying, whoa, let's put the brakes on everything, okay? So if someone does truly have Addison's disease, one of the reasons why is that they might have a pituitary tumor, okay? So if they have a pituitary tumor that might be secreting a stimulating hormone, it might cause the actual adrenals to just keep pumping out cortisol all the time until finally they just start to give up. And they start to give out and they start to get very fatigued. So I've seen that where people have had a pituitary tumor and they're like, man, my adrenals were running on like 1,000% and I felt great. I had tons of energy. I couldn't even sleep. It didn't matter. It was like being on caffeine drip like all the time. But eventually then it started to actually give out. So if someone does truly, have adrenal insufficiency or Addison's disease, usually I would say the number one reason why, and don't quote me, but pituitary tumor, or they have a tumor on the actual adrenal gland that's secreting cortisol. But let's talk about some other reasons why. Some of the other reasons why could also be you might be dealing with a long-term infection, okay? Just remember this too, because cortisol is very anti-inflammatory, and if you need inflammation in order to handle that infection, the adrenal glands can start to down-regulate in order to make sure that the immune system stays up here. So I have actually seen it, but usually these people is that they are dealing with some kind of infection. I've also seen where their adrenal glands aren't kicking out hardly anything, and they're dealing with cancer, as well. So I've seen it in mold, I've seen it in cancer, and I've seen it in a tumor. So there could be a lot of different reasons why. So if it is truly, in fact, Addison's disease, you got to figure out, what is the reason why? So when we see those adrenal gland function really low, there's something else that is going on, especially. All right? Just remember, a lot of what you're dealing with is going to be due to too much mental stress, and also dealing with something that is interfering, something that is really starting to irritate that immune system especially. So your hormones, whether it's your thyroid, whether it's your fertility hormones, your adrenal gland, things like that, just remember, they're responding. They are responding to a stressor taking place. Sometimes the stressor can be a tumor as well. So hopefully, guys, that makes sense. I appreciate you guys being on with me and watching. I have no idea how long I went, but I always go way too long. So guys, if you are joining us, remember on Thursday, we're going to be doing a webinar on thyroid, the untold story. So this is going to be a webinar Thursday, April 1st, 8 o'clock p.m. It's going to be a live webinar. And we are going to be talking about literally all things thyroid. And on Saturday, when I went over the thyroid, people were like, oh my goodness. Like people said I had a thyroid issue. I'd never understood what it meant, why I'm feeling this way. And in fact, the number one thing that people say is I went to the doctor, I had high TSH, they gave me T4, and I still felt like garbage. They said my problem was fixed. Why do I still feel like garbage? And we're going to show you why, because it goes down so deeply, but we make it really easy for you to be able to understand, guys. There's really only five things, five, that really could be going wrong when it comes to your thyroid. And if you know those five, you'll know how to test properly, and you'll know actually where to look, and you'll know what you need to do in order to start fixing the thyroid. Because remember, it's not a thyroid problem. There's no such thing as a thyroid problem. There's something else. The thyroid is merely just responding. So guys, this is pinned to the top of our page for the Eventbrite link. Remember, if you go, you register on Eventbrite, tickets are $15. We will send you where to register for the webinar on Webinar Jam is the platform that we use. And then, so that way they'll send you a link to be able to join us the night of the event for that actual live webinar. So guys, make sure you get registered for that. It is going to be awesome. And make sure that you share this, because this will be available throughout the whole entire country. So anybody, I don't care where they're watching from, because they need help, we'll find a doctor for them that can help them. Well, we have now 75 different offices all across the country. So we'll find an office that will fit them best, and that they can start to get the help that they need. So guys, make sure you register for that webinar. And if you got any other topics you want me to talk about, leave a comment below, and I'll do my best to make sure that we try to get to it. Sometimes I always, I need some ideas. Now is one of them. So I always appreciate you guys leaving some comments on what I always want to get a pulse on what you guys need to know and what you guys are thinking. So guys, Be well. I am now heading to eat. I know it's late. It's just how it is. So I'm going to be going to eat, and I hope you guys have a great Monday night. Make sure again that you share this, and we will see you guys very soon. Be well. Have a good night.